Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. And I'd want to say Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to 2023. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Happy New Year to you. And good evening to our colleagues on this platform. I hope we've got all of them back. And I say compliments of this season to you all.
Yes, I'm sure they would all be joining us as we go on, sir. But first of all, sir, I think that we're getting to that season in this side of the world where things are starting to freeze up on our side. So we're expecting some real heavy snow, is what they tell us. So maybe we'll be having a white event before the end of the month on the program. Who knows? So I've got loads of questions for you. And before I go into the questions, I'm going to put you on the spot. We're starting the year by putting you on the spot. I won't ask the question now, but I'm sure you haven't seen this. I've got something here for you, sir, that I'm going to be asking you about.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So you're one of those who queued up all night to get hold of a copy of that book.
One of the 1.4 million who have bought the book so far. Yes, so that's aligned. But again, I want to also say to this time last year, we shared with you a copy of thruMYeyes, all the sessions that we had gone through with Prof. Another one will be coming out. We will be sharing that in the first quarter of this year. That will be coming out as well, covering all the sessions from here in book formats that you can download. So please look out for that. Sorry, it's not out at this time, but I'll make sure that when that is released, I mention it on the program. So let's start off the program with, let's start with COVID-19. It was somewhat gone, and the world was starting to see the end of COVID-19. But now it looks like we're seeing another strain. It looks like China is now battling this very deadly pandemic in a way that perhaps some had not expected, had not anticipated. So what are your views on where things are evolving to now with COVID-19 and its impact on Africa?
Well, really, I wouldn't want to go into this topic because it's so far away from my field. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical practitioner. However, having said that, I try to educate myself a lot through the views of people who know what they're talking about. First of all, COVID-19 never left us. Variations of it came up from time to time, Omicron, and what have you. Two, we were rushed, and I don't blame anybody for this. All of us were in a state of panic. Government, people, commentators, those who knew what they were talking about, those who didn't know what they were talking about, we were all in a state of panic as to how to react to this new plague. And I am starting to get the impression that initially we thought they were conspiracy theorists. But the more one is reading, the more one is hearing, and some of what we read leaves one confused, makes it look like we were panicked into what was not a solution. Medication, vaccination, that the consequences for the human body were not evaluated to its logical conclusion. But mark you what I said, I don't blame anybody, from prime ministers, kings, queens, all the way down to the gardener. We were all in a state of panic. And when you react in a state of panic, mistakes get made. Now we are going to have to live with those mistakes. Number two, we should be careful. You see, I expect we should depoliticize global affairs, because people went about criticizing the Chinese for being tough on COVID-19, lockdown. Whatever is going to take, one outbreak, the lockdown. Honestly, the whole world went again, now they don't have a free society. How can they do this? How can they do that? Domestic tax in China. And now the Chinese sign, we are lifting our constraints. You can travel, you can go where you like, you can come where you like, and so on. And now, we are now reacting by saying we will check or test either anybody or most people coming out of China. And there have been results. One was from the Italians, that they tested the plane load, and 39 passengers of the people in that plane were COVID-19 positive. Because of that, now governments are now climbing down on Chinese travelers, and the Chinese are now retaliating. Now, again, where is that going to get us? We need more openness about this virus. Number two, somebody has suggested that swabs taken from even dead people when we were testing everybody for COVID-19, now that they've done more sequencing, they should go back and retest those swabs. Maybe there will even be presence of other viral agents that are present there, which they couldn't test for at that time. At the end of the day, we are, believe me, in the hands of the Lord, because I don't think which we are doing. If you could say it, and it's a sad commentary on our civilization, our humanity, that one could even say silver lining. The only silver lining for me, as a member of the Global South, is that this thing is not from the Global South. We are not being held responsible for it before somebody then comes up with some vaccination to polish off people from the Global South have been the source of this plague.
I asked the question then, sir, and I will ask it again now, and that is, are we doing enough in Africa, even maybe preparing for this new situation that's evolving and is developing? Because as I understand it, is a new variant. Are we taking it seriously enough?
No, no. We were afflicted by our own, we are bogged down by politics. We are bogged down by ethnic rivalry. We are bogged down by putting square pegs into round holes. We are bogged down by misapplication of resources. The leaders that we have are too much preoccupied with playing with the power constellation rather than identifying the core mandate of what they should be doing for their people. We've gone backwards. I mean, let's know, I'm not running down Africa, and I'm not running down Nigeria, but we used to produce, we had a viable, vibrant vaccine medical laboratories in Lagos here. We were producing vaccine for yellow fever, vaccine for smallpox, vaccine for liver. There were departments of virology in Nigerian universities. And yet all of that perished simply because, number one, is this concentration of power, resources, attention at the very top, and from there it's supposed to percolate down. We in Africa have not learned the lesson of decentralization, where you are given responsibility, you're given the funds, and you're given a free hand. If you succeed, fine. If you don't succeed, you take responsibility. But first of all, we borrowed this British system, which might have worked in Britain, where you set up an institution, you appoint a chief executive for it, and then they give you a governing council. The governing council is simply supposed to lay, broad parameters of policy and let you get on with the job. Oh no, in Africa, the council becomes the chief executive. They hamstring the chief executive, and yet is the one held responsible whether the thing fails or not. They should abolish this concept of boards and abolish the concept of governing councils. You give me a job to do, leave me to do it. If I fail, I take responsibility, you fire me. If I succeed, okay, fine, I take the praise for it. But the mishmash of governance that we have, to me, doesn't make sense. Number two, even at the level of governance, we practically now all probably have presidential systems of government. Presidential system of government does not work with the cabinet form of governance. The cabinet form of governance is compatible with the parliamentary form of government. If you appoint me, you are president, you appoint me Minister of Agriculture, what concerns the Minister of Works about my agricultural policy is between me and the president. If the president finds that I've made sense with the policy document I've brought to him, he approves and I get on with the job. But when I have to bring a paper to cabinet, Minister of Sports, who does not have experts on agriculture, is now calling for modification of what I have brought. He hasn't studied it, probably picked up 1 or 2 points, but he wants to appear relevant. And then you say, take back this paper, go and modify it. By the time it comes back, it's neither agric, nor sports, nor works. It's just a mishmash of a document. And then you say I have failed as a Minister of Agriculture, or that we have no agricultural policy. How do we have an agricultural policy when it's something produced by cabinet and not, even in Britain, where the cabinet form of government is probably more entrenched than anywhere else. There are policies now which you identify with the Home Office, Foreign Office, Trade and Development, and that those ministers are held responsible. You don't bring something then to Parliament and have it, unscrambled before your very eyes, and then you have to go and do it. So in a way, for all these reasons, we are not tackling the COVID-19 or any 19 for that matter, whether COVID or not.
Sir, I'm sure that someone listening to that point around cabinets and words like that may say, well, are you not advocating a system where one is removing certain checks and balances in place for one individual to go in with proposals that maybe have not been vetted by other people who may be stakeholders?
Let the stakeholders be in the presidency. If I submit a document, if I bring a proposal to the president, well, let's let the president to have his board of economic advisors, board of this, board of that, who are his sole advisors, whom he could then say, take a look at this document on agriculture or on sports. Look, listen, I've been honored by this country in terms of policy initiatives, which I had come up with when I was a cabinet minister. All of them were with the approval of President Babangida. All of them almost got messed up. All of them almost got messed up by the cabinet. Babangida overruled the cabinet. Take the technical aid cost scheme, which is regarded as one of the best innovations that we have had in our foreign policy, parameters since independence. When I brought it to cabinet, half of members of the cabinet, including the person who was his number 2, were so hostile to it. They could not even understand the simple philosophy behind that, which is you have voted for us a foreign aid program. I don't want to spend this foreign aid program giving out checks to foreign governments. Let me spend the money you have approved for me to sponsor Nigerian technical expertise to those governments that want them, that need them. We spend the money on our people, but they go and show their technical skill in other countries. That's the basic philosophy. No, the people were shooting at it from, why should we be spending dollars, why should we be paying our own people dollars? And we have, we need experts in Nigeria. Why should we be sending experts out? These all kind of irrelevancies until IBB simply said, Minister of External Affairs, you have had comments from your colleagues. Go and improve on the scheme Don't bring it back here. Go and implement. Just like that. A weak president will have said, well, the cabinet is opposed to it. So, sorry, not approved. And we will have lost that chance. But there is another one that I lost, which was to make the foreign service a separate service completely and part of the service, because they operate abroad. Their mandate is abroad. They have difficulties abroad, not faced by people at home. If you're a civil servant at home, you can occupy your house for 35, 40 years that you are spending in the service. Foreign service ambassadors come, they spend 3 years abroad. Their houses are embassies abroad. They come back, then they have to start looking for school for their children, look for houses for themselves, this, and then they are home for 3 years, you pack them off again. So they have different needs. No, I couldn't get the cabinet to approve it. And yet today, almost everyone in Nigeria is saying we need a separate foreign service because they need special attention. But because of the nature of constitutional amendments, we haven't been able to put into operation something on which there's now a consensus that we need a separate foreign service. So that is part of what I mean. The checks and balances are not in the cabinet, they are with the president, in the presidency. Half of people in the cabinet don't even read their documents before they come, because it doesn't really affect them. It doesn't.
So you talked about sports there in your example, and it triggered something in my mind that I want to take you to the Middle East to discuss this issue that's going on between Iraq and Iran, where Iraq has called something the Arabian Gulf Cup, which has then sparked some anger in Iran about the choice of the name. But the angles that I want to put to you is this. World Cup just concluded in Qatar. We know there is a lot happening with Saudi Arabia. It seems that the Middle East is taking quite a bit of time and investment into sports, and maybe to an extent soft diplomacy there. What is your view about this whole delving into sports that we're seeing coming out of the Middle East, sir?
Well, I will let you go. I will let you get past by with this, because you are developing a style of asking your own question and answering them. Sports diplomacy has become now a vibrant projection of soft power. It's part of the transmutation we are having from one set of factors of the old world order and the new one coming up. And people who have the resources are waking up to the achievements embedded in soft power diplomacy. You can't compete with the Americans in terms of how many floating battleships you have, how many rockets you can send to the moon, how many fighting ships that you have, how many nuclear weapons you have. But if you have the resources, you can compete with the Americans or the Russians or the Chinese on how you can at least 4, even a month, bring the world to you through sponsorship of sports, global sports for that matter. And Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states haven't seen what has happened at Doha. Is it Doha? Yes. For the last World Cup. I've now latched on into that. Saudi Arabia is sponsoring an alternative golf tournament to the regular ones we used to have. They are sponsoring is it tennis? Or there's somebody who is behind a new tennis tournament, separate from the PTA that they used to have. Saudi Arabia is sponsoring motor rallies. So they're making money from it, by the way. They are not behaving like global South countries who will spend money recklessly. Maybe 20% of it will go into the pocket of those who are supposed to be operating the show. They are making money from it. Though I didn't make a loss from all the amount of money it spent. And you know, I once had a chat with somebody who should know what was talking about how you can even use sports to build domestic stability and domestic unity in your country. That because they've discovered that when there is football on, people stop fighting. We even did it during the Civil War in this country. That's how we brought Pele and Santos' team to Nigeria during our Civil War. And for the 2 days they spent here, the Civil War stopped. Both sides knew Pele was in town and they wanted to watch, the matches. And this fellow said to me, if every weekend, either at the local government level or at the state level, you have leagues, you will be amazed as to how people involved in this will forget that they have differences on ethnicity basis. It will be my club is playing this club and that club, and you build on the unity that starts off small. Before you know it, you're not talking about Ashanti versus Fanti, Hausa versus Igbo, Zulu versus this. You are not talking about your team versus that team, even at the local government level. So this is really what's happened. And the Arabs have latched onto that, and I say kudos to them. But there is a danger, the danger that you highlighted in your intro. Don't let the tournament become another divisive element. Iraq was wrong to have called the golf tournament Arabic golf tournament, when you know that the Iranians are Persians. They are not Arabs, they are Persians. It's like you calling the football tournament Sunni football tournament, when you know that it's on the other side. If you want to use something that will be acceptable to the Gulf states, just call it the Gulf Regional Tournament or the Gulf World Tournament. After all, Americans play football, and they call it the World Series. even though they're the only ones playing it, we accept that the United States is a it's a continent in itself. One can understand that, but don't use terms that are divisive. It will then negate the whole purpose of having soft power diplomacy.
All right, sir. Now I'm going to take you to the impact of this book on diplomacy. And given the number of copies the book has now sold, first of all, how do you react to the book? Now, is this the first time I'm going to get a book before you?
Actually, no. Because, yes, you're holding on to the book, which is my favorite, my favorite way of holding books. But the electronic copy, I got it, I think about 5 minutes past midnight before your shops were open. Mark you, it's been a strain on my eyes. I prefer to hold that book. So be careful if your copy disappears. To come and look for it. Well, thanks for the modality of your introduction, because you've put me at least in a happy mood the way you introduced this book. This book has made me very, very sorrowful. Very, very sorrowful. I'm not angry. I'm filled with sorrow. First of all, let me tell you where I'm coming from. Because on this program, we talk about the cultural disparity between the global north and the global south. I have felt aghast at the levity or at times hostility of commentators in the global south about this book called Spare. It's almost as if our commentators were feeding off the commentary coming from the global north. Why do I say this? Let's go back. Let us start with the African culture. Basically, our African culture was polygamous. But let me use a broader term. If a wife has a baby in an atmosphere of hostility within the family, you know what? The elders will come and say to that woman, you better take your child and go back to your people. When that child grows up, he will know his father's house, and you can bring him back. But for you to stay here, surrounded by these hostilities within the family, they'll kill that child, and the woman will take her child, and off she will go back to her own people. It even happened to what's his name? This Zulu king, the most famous of the Zulu kings, because the mother wasn't popular and she wasn't the first wife. So she had to take, Chaka the Zulu. She has to take the child away and come back later. Now, what's this got to do with Harry? Harry is that child born into a hostile environment. And yet, I hear our culture say, well, why can't he stay within the farm and fight. He's a coward, he's run away. Why is he destroying the family? He's come under the control of Megan and so on. Where is the mother to protect this child, even if he had stayed within the family? You see, Spare is not Harry's story. Spare is the story of Diana told through Harry. Why do I say that? There are episodes from the day he was born which showed him, I would say, quote unquote, unwanted. Let me give you one example. He couldn't have had the conversation. I mean, he was just born. The mother must have told him that the day you were born, your father said to me, I am finished with you, Diana. You've given me a heir, Prince William, and now you have given me a spare, which is where that title comes from. And that is Harry. Harry is just supposed to be standby. You know, the footballer sitting on the bench in case something happens to William. You saw how Ronaldo has just reacted to being benched all the time. He said that Man U did not show him any respect, and he had no respect for Man U. He's gone, he's walked away. This boy was then 10 years old when his mother, quote unquote, was killed because he and his brother and the majority of people in the world believe that Diana was killed. Even Diana said she granted interviews saying the royal family is going to kill me. They will arrange a car accident for me. All of this going into the ears of a 10-year-old, and you are telling me that is a brat, is not showing sympathy for the family. Harry has been more sinned against than sinning. He had to run for his dear life. And he found in Megan what he called the love of his life. I will call her the stability of his life. Because you see, you could ask, why is William not behaving like Harry? William had been treated as the heir to the throne. Everything else be damned. The job of the palace was to prepare heirs to the throne. So whatever they need to do for William and to William, they did it. Harry be damned. They threw him under the bus for the press. Oh, he drinks, he uses drugs, he does this, he does that. Go and play with all that stories. He said they were leaking against him. And then he met Megan. And that showed which we have discussed before. Remember that when we discussed that interview with Oprah Winfrey, it now showed the underbelly of racism in Britain. You're going to get married to an American. There's a streak of Americanism in British press. He's going to marry a person of color. He's going to marry a divorcee. Wow. Never mind that practically all the children of Queen Elizabeth were divorcees. She was actually the only one who stood with the husband. They were all divorcees. And yet you are going to crucify Harry for marrying this woman who didn't fit. And there was nothing they did as a couple. Read the book that was acceptable to the palace establishment. Either the color of her lipstick was not the right one, is rivaling Kate, the hairstyle is rivaling Kate, so she cannot do her hairstyle this way. She cannot wear this kind of dressing. Kate, Harry and Meghan went on a tour of South America, the West Indies. They were so well received. The crowd warmed towards them. They said they were upstaging William and Kate. Nothing that they could do that was right. And so Harry came to the conclusion that just as they killed his mother, they will kill his wife if he didn't get out. So I feel sorrow in my heart for Harry. I really, really do. And each time, I flip my electronic page, I am cringing as to what else would I come across. He's still a floating anchor. And the irony of all of this is that the only person who could provide that anchor for him in life is Meghan. But Meghan is an American. The American believe in telling it all. The highest number of paid psychiatrists in the world is in the United States. They think you cope with anger, you cope with whatever destabilizing you by telling it all. The British believe in stiff upper lip. And, so she's the one who could provide that anchor, but she also probably have bought into the American style that when you tell it all, you stabilize. I don't believe in that. So really, I feel sorry. I feel sorrow for both Harry and Meghan. They were cut off, in any case, from royal funds. So they need to make money in order to survive. I remember reading a book where the Duke, King Edward the King Edward VIII, the one who abdicated, came to Queen Elizabeth, she became queen, to ask for his stipend to please be increased because he was living in exile in Paris, and it was refused. I suppose they didn't want to be put in that kind of a situation. So all these books that are coming out, all these interviews, they are getting paid. And only God knows the kind of agreement he has signed about how many more books will have to be written, just so that those millions that they need to educate their children, that they need to maintain their own lives that could start coming. But, oh, it's terrible what he must be going through. It's terrible.
I have two questions.
Please, if our people want to disagree with me, if they want to send in questions, please let them do so and disagree with me. I'm perfectly happy about that. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry for happy.
There are two questions here, sir. One from the previous topic and one on this one. I'll put both of them to you, sir. The first one says, what do you think about FIFA awarding an Arab Nations Cup? Do you think we should have a Black African Nations Cup? Interesting question. Second one is, do you think Harry's expose will herald the end of the British monarchy? If so, what is the implication for the Commonwealth?
I hope I am reading that first question right. Because there is an African Cup of Nations. It's questioner implying that there is that African Cup of Nations is a nebulous concept. If you are going to have Arab Cup of Nations, Black African Cup of Nations, again, you will recall that on this very program, and I think we ought to have a robust debate. This is over 1 year old. What is an African? Who is an African? We will be talking about continental identity. We will be talking about color of the skin. Is that what would describe who is an African? What are the benefits and the disadvantages to us Africans south of the Sahara of being lumped with Arabs under one rubric, African? Let's have a debate about this. Often a bad messenger spoils the message. I recall Mobutu Sese Seko, whom we will never and we should never forgive for the murder of Patrice Lumumba. I remember him at one time calling for a division of the OAU. Let the Arabs go and let us have Black Africans. So we know who we are, rather than all this that we are neither fish nor fowl. But because it was coming from Mobutu, it was shouted down, never given any discussion. Even though he had some sympathetic supporters in Frebonye at that time of Ivory Coast and one or two others from Gabon. But for the rest of Africa, we wouldn't hear anything of it. I think sooner or later, may not be my lifetime, Africa south of the Sahara is going to have to come to terms with the definition of who is an African. Because if you think, I had all that, Morocco is representing, they will say the Arab world, African world, Muslim world. That's nonsense. Morocco never represented the African world. They finally ran down their throat. The press did that to make it more lively. Three identities, African, Arab, Muslim. That makes the cup more whatever. But it never resonated with me. I never thought Morocco was representing us, but continental-wise, well, there you are. So if the import of then the question is, if they have an Arab cup, we should now have a Black African cup. I would say, why not? Why not? We should confront this issue. If we can't resolve it, then we can't resolve it. The question about whether, it's a dent. It's a dent in the armor of the monarchy. But to say, the British monarchy has survived so many Muhammad Ali punches, go through the period of Henry VIII, when he was simply beheading all his wives and beheading archbishops of Canterbury, anybody who didn't agree with him. They got through that and got to the Victorian age. And then you have a period where princes were disappearing in the Tower of London over succession rights. Charles I was beheaded. I don't know what happened to Charles II. We're having Charles III. So, They go through this, then they modify themselves. The British are very good, very, very good at modification. They would change their appearance and keep the core there. So period came when the monarchy was no longer an executive monarchy. It was a ceremonial monarchy. And boy, nobody prepares a ceremonial like the British. Give that to them. Coronation. I mean, look at the way they did the Queen's burial. The whole world kept still. The whole world kept still. Even the Americans, with their 1776 revolution against Britain, they brought their president to London, to come and pay tribute, to the Queen. So they will modify it in some way. I suspect, however, that by the time you get to Prince George, that's the fourth son of Prince William, who knows what the state of the world will be and how that monarchy, it may just become like the Scandinavian monarchies. And in any case, what do they do now? In any case, apart from cutting flowers, cutting tapes, waving to people, and keeping their wealth intact, what else do they do? For us in the Commonwealth, all Nigerian presidential candidates not going to Britain now, they will find a way of summoning, don't let me be rude to our leaders.
There's a question coming in that direction, sir.
Yeah.
There's a question here on, this one is from Zoom that I want to put across. It says, this person says they're worried about the role of the British press in the whole monarchical impasse. Do you think it is protective of the monarchy, or is it working for the destruction of the monarchy? That's an interesting take. This person wants to understand the politics of this suspect activism by the British press.
Well, no, see, the British press bifurcated into two. You've got the high, what one we call the high establishment press, Financial Times. I don't know what else used to be there. The Times of London, before Murdoch bought it over, used to be the paper of the establishment. Now, the Times of London had actually fallen, in my estimation, into the category of the Daily Mail, the Mirror. I don't know whether there's still the Punch, I don't know. Who caters for the beer smuggling working class that forgets that they have a lot in common with fellow, was it not Marx who said, workers of the world unite? No. The British working class now think they are superior to the working class of other countries. And they feed them with that. You are British, you are superior, forgetting that they are working class. And then you have The Guardian, which is the thinking paper now in Britain. But then how many? Britain that can vote for Brexit, cutting its nose off to spite its face because it remembers the days of empire. How many people are still thinking in Britain? How many? So I don't know what the press thinks its role is. If it thinks it can bring down the monarchy and have the crowd baying for the head of the king, you will find the newspapers that will, but they are all teleguided. Do you remember D-Notice? A lot of our people may be too young to remember D-Notice. Until the 60s, 1960s or 70s, there was an institution called the D notice, where government tells the press, you cannot publish this, and they will not publish it. Now, the D notice institution had disappeared. But if you want to be invited to Buckingham Palace, and you're a palace correspondent, you may even have the chance of being given OBE or MBE. They feed you with nuggets of tantalizing rumors to destroy whoever they think is against the monarchy. And the press runs with this and publishes this, and then everybody is in uproar. So I'm not sure the press is thinking about what is our ultimate objective with the monarchy. I'm not sure the press is thinking about that. So for that matter.
Yes, sir. There's one question I want to put to you before we close this evening. And that is we talked a lot about Ethiopia, the Tigrayans, and the challenge that was going there. We finally seem to be having some peace in that area, and things seem to be returning to normal. But then when we look at that situation in the context of other people in Nigeria, for example, calling for, we may say they're agitators, or we may say freedom fighters, whatever term we give to them, who are calling for the same sort of recognition. What would your take be? What kind of message would you be giving to people who are calling for that? I know it's in different parts of Africa, but maybe Nigeria as well.
You see, why don't we ever learn from history? Why? Why must we suffer the same consequences time and time and time again, and we still don't learn? He who doesn't learn from the lesson of history, Santayana said, is bound to repeat it. They will get all the mistakes, the tragedies, and all what have you. Why must the Tigrayan people go through losing? I don't know. You never know figures in a civil war. Is it 500,000 of Tigrayans? And when the Tigray forces, ably assisted by foreign weapons, moved across into swaths of Ethiopia, they also killed a lot of people before they were pushed back. And then you have victims of starvation and so on. And now, what some of us have been telling them, you cannot win a war of secession in Africa. You cannot. They may be egging you on. I was waiting for the international media to ask the Tigrayan people, you ruled in government in Addis Ababa for 30 years. You found nothing wrong with the system. But when another group took over, you then started screaming marginalization, and you ran back to your enclave, attacked the federal military posts there, and you now think they will let you go. What was wrong now? That wasn't wrong then when you were in government. But no. And let me sound this note of warning about we Africans in the diaspora. Unfortunately, because of the large presence of Africans in the diaspora now, with access to the social media, they in fact promote more of this recklessness amongst their people at home, but they are safe in Washington, they are safe in London, they are safe in Paris. They sit there and put all this rubbish on the social media, continue to stoke the fire of recklessness at home and exposing their people or their supporters to the ravages of this recklessness. Especially in the United States, all it will take is for one Tigrayan or one whatever to be elected a member of Congress, and the access to the press. I mean, we've seen how 15 members of the House of Rep held the election of the speaker to ransom for almost a whole week. One member in the diaspora will talk to colleagues, and before you know it, that is the version you will be getting, and that will be influencing American policy or British policy towards the crisis in Africa. I think we need to interrogate very carefully the role of Africans in the diaspora vis-a-vis developments at home, and wonder whether it is for good or for evil. It will be for good if their policies is to encourage investment in understanding and what have you of what is going back, what is happening back at home. But if the role of the diaspora, as I said, is to engineer, we will always have difficulty. We will always have disagreements. You have disagreements within the family. You have disagreements within a religion. You have disagreements amongst villages, even though they speak the same language. But to make sure that these disagreements do not metamorphose into virulent antagonism, we need to interrogate the activities and the influence of Africans in the diaspora. And I hope that the lesson we've learned from the Tigrayan something is, even if you are going to win, because you could cite the examples of Yugoslavia to me, but the victims of the Yugoslavian civil war, till today, people remember concentration camps in Yugoslavia. Is that what you want for Africa? At a stage when other continents are developing? Is that what you want? Britain is now about to, yes, it was my sympathy. It was, you couldn't get that rocket off to the moon or wherever you send it, but that's where people are headed. And you are still heading for where, where you will also, be allowed to perambulate. That is what you are still fighting about in the 21st century? No.
Thank you very much, sir. What a way to start the year. Thank you to our viewers across the platforms. We will be back same time next week. That would be 7 p.m. West African time, Nigeria time, and other people in other parts of the world can pick your time from there. Thank you so much, sir, for this evening.
Pleasure.
We will be back next week. Good night, sir.
Good night. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, sir.